All right, so today we're taking a deep dive into something I know a lot of folks out there are thinking about.
Yeah.
Migrating Microsoft Dynamics CRM from on-prem, so like
Yeah.
you've got the servers in your office,
Right.
to Dynamics 365 Online, which is obviously
The cloud.
the cloud.
Yeah.
You guys send in some awesome resources to help us really unpack this.
Yeah.
We've got some info straight from Microsoft Learn.
Always a good place to start.
Yeah. There's a great tech talk, super insightful, by Josh Newkart-Gupta on the Michael Cobbin YouTube channel. You should definitely check out that channel if you haven't already.
Lots of good stuff there.
Yeah. And to round things out, we have a couple of super helpful articles by Shamara Irish Widrasna on Medium. So what we really want to get into today is, why is this move such a big deal?
Mm-hmm.
And then how do you actually do it? What are those nitty-gritty steps involved?
Yeah, like what are the gotchas?
Exactly. What are the benefits? What are the potential things you might trip up on along the way? So no matter where you are, technically, hopefully we can shed some light on this whole process for you.
Yeah, and break it down so it's actually understandable. No matter where you're at with all the techie stuff.
Exactly. All right, so let's jump right in. Why would anyone want to move away from their on-premises CRM setup? Why go through that hassle?
Well, a huge reason is cost. That comes up a lot in those articles by Chamara Irish Widrathna on Medium.
Right.
Think about it. Running your own system, it's not cheap. There's the servers themselves, the space they take up. Then you've got to power those things, keep them cool. That's a lot of overhead, just keeping the system alive.
Yeah, it's like a whole hidden cost.
Exactly. And moving to Dynamics 365 Online, it shifts all that responsibility to Microsoft. You're not footing the bill for those infrastructure costs anymore. And think about it, you could take those resources, the money you're saving, and reinvest it back into your core business.
That makes a lot of sense. It's not just the initial cost, though, right? I mean, keeping the system running, doing those upgrades, it's a lot of work.
Absolutely. That's another big point which Rathna makes. With Dynamics 365 Online, Microsoft handles all those upgrades, all the maintenance behind the scenes. It just happens. No more having to plan out those massive upgrade projects, taking your system down for hours or even days.
Yeah, and hoping everything actually works when you bring it back up.
Right. It's a huge relief for your IT team. They can focus on other stuff, more strategic projects.
So it's like you wouldn't need as many IT people just to keep the CRM system going.
Yeah, exactly. You'd probably need less dedicated expertise in-house for things like managing the infrastructure and the database. Microsoft is taking care of all that in the cloud.
Right. Okay, so we've got cost, we've got less maintenance. What about uptime? Making sure the system is always there when you need it, and what happens if, disaster strikes?
That's super important, and that's where the online version really shines. Microsoft guarantees 99.9% uptime for Dynamics 365 Online. Plus, they've got some really robust disaster recovery features built in. If you tried to build that level of reliability yourself on premises, it could get really complicated, really expensive.
So you're basically getting a whole lot of peace of mind with the online version.
Definitely. And Widrathna also brings up the fact that you get better support from Microsoft with the online version.
Okay, so how does that work? What's the difference between on-prem support and online support?
Well, with Dynamics 365 Online, you've got that direct line to Microsoft for any product issues. If something goes wrong, you can contact their support team directly. With on-premises, you're often on your own, relying on your own internal IT folks, or maybe having to bring in external consultants to figure things out.
Right, so it sounds like we're talking about potential cost savings, less maintenance, better reliability, and easier support. Now, what about for the people actually using the system every day? What does it look like from their perspective?
Well, one of the biggest changes is that you can access Dynamics 365 online from anywhere. You don't have to be in the office, chained to your desk.
Yeah, as long as you've got an internet connection, right?
Exactly. So if you've got remote teams, people who travel a lot for work, it's the game changer. They can stay connected to the CRM system no matter where they are.
Right. And what about how it works with other Microsoft tools? A lot of us are already using Office 365, things like that.
It's all designed to work together seamlessly. Dynamics 365 Online integrates really well with Office 365. You can often use your same Office 365 login to access both. Plus, you can take advantage of those enterprise-grade security features, things like multi-factor authentication, really easily.
Right. And I think we all appreciate that extra layer of security these days.
Definitely. And another big plus is that you can access Dynamics 365 Online from all your devices, not just your computer.
So your phone, your tablet, everything's synced up.
Exactly. You can work from wherever you are, whatever device you have handy.
I think I remember reading something about email integration, too.
Yeah, there's a specific Outlook app for Dynamics 365. It's awesome. You can track emails, connect them to your CRM data, all right within Outlook. It's a real time saver for sales teams, marketing folks, anyone who's dealing with customer communication.
So you're not constantly switching between different applications. It's all right there.
Exactly. And then finally, Wijeratna talks about getting access to all these online-only features.
Okay, so what are what kind of new capabilities are we talking about?
Well, this is where you start to see the power of the cloud. You get access to Power Apps, which lets you build your own custom applications without having to write a ton of code.
Right.
There's Power Automate, which used to be called Flows. It helps you automate all those repetitive tasks, streamline your business processes. And then you've got Power BI for creating those really cool data visualizations and reports.
Right.
So it really expands what you can do with CRM, takes it to a whole other level.
Okay, so it sounds like there are some pretty compelling reasons to make the move. Now let's get into the how. The stuff from Microsoft Learn mentions something called on-premises to online OP2OL migration services. And there's this self-service tool. Who exactly is this tool for?
Okay, so according to Microsoft Learn, the OP2OL migration services and the self-service tool, they're for customers running supported versions of Dynamics CRM,
Okay.
which basically means Dynamics CRM 2016 on-premises or any later version. So if you're on something older than that, it might be a different story.
All right. So that's where that tech talk by Josh Gupta on YouTube comes in, right?
Yeah.
He really gets into the details of this FastTrack migration tool.
Yeah, he does a great job of explaining it.
He mentions that it was created to solve some of the problems that came up with the older ways of migrating. What were those old ways like?
Well, he talks about how those older methods often involve tools like SSI, Kingsway Soft, and Scribe.
Okay.
And those were largely manual processes.
Wow.
Yeah, a lot of time, a lot of effort involved, especially if you were running an older version of CRM, like CRM 2011.
Oh, wow.
The structure of CRM, the schema, it changed quite a bit over the years. So trying to manually map and move all your data, it was really complex, easy to make mistakes. There wasn't really a clear guided process, not much automation, and no way to know if your customizations would actually work in the online environment until you were already in the middle of the migration.
So this FastTrack tool was built to make it all a lot smoother.
Exactly. Gupta really emphasizes that. It's automated, guides you through the process step by step, and it's designed to be user-friendly. Like it actually gives you information along the way, tells you what's happening.
Right.
One of the coolest things, though, is that it includes a validation check for your solutions.
Yeah.
So it can flag any customizations that might not be compatible with Dynamics 365 online before you even start migrating.
So you can address those issues up front. That's awesome. What about the technology behind it? How does it actually work?
Okay, so on a high level, you access the tool through the Lifecycle Services portal.
Okay.
And that's basically Microsoft's central hub for managing your Dynamics 365 environment online. A big part of it is that it sets up all the environments you need for the migration in your own Azure subscription.
So that's Azure, like Microsoft's cloud platform.
Exactly. And that's for security reasons, making sure your data stays under your control. And the whole process is based on what they call staged upgrades. So depending on what version of CRM you're coming from, the tool might take your database through an intermediate version, like CRM 2016, before it goes to the latest Dynamics 365 online.
So if you're on, say, CRM 2013, it won't try to jump directly to the latest version.
Probably not. It might need those intermediate steps to make sure everything transitions smoothly. Gupta talks about how the tool uses different services within Azure. So it's using your Azure Infrastructure as a Service, or IaaS, to host those temporary environments that are needed for the upgrades. Azure Storage is used to store your database backups, and that's basically like a secure storage space in the cloud. The Lifecycle Services portal itself, that's where the migration tool actually lives, and it kind of orchestrates the whole process. And then there's the CRM validation service, which checks your customizations, and the CRM organization migration service, which handles the final move of your database to Dynamics 365 online.
Right, so it's using a whole bunch of different pieces of the cloud puzzle.
Exactly. It's all working together behind the scenes to get your data migrated.
Right. So starting with that on-premises SQL database, what actually happens to it?
Okay, so first you take a full backup of your on-premises SQL database, you get that backup file, and then you upload it to Azure Blob Storage. And the nice thing is the migration tool actually creates that storage container for you automatically, so you don't have to go digging around in Azure trying to figure out where to put things. From there, the backup is restored to an intermediate CRM version within your Azure environment. What that version is, it depends on what you started with. And then the tool takes over and automatically handles all those upgrades through the intermediate versions, all the way up to CRM 2016.
Okay.
After it hits 2016, that's when it runs the validation check we were talking about. And then finally, once it passes all the checks, the fully upgraded database gets migrated over to your Dynamics 365 online organization. Gupta actually mentioned seeing a demo where they were making an API call to that temporary CRM 2016 environment right before the final migration.
Oh, wow. So you can actually interact with it at that stage.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Gupta also talks about working with a FastTrack program manager. So it's not all just like clicking buttons in a tool, right?
Yeah.
There's a human element involved.
Yeah, definitely. The FastTrack team at Microsoft, they're there to guide you through the whole process. They provide support, answer questions, and that dedicated program manager is your point person.
Okay, that's great to know. So before we get into the step-by-step, what are the absolute must-haves before you even think about starting this migration? Gupta's transcript gives a good list of prerequisites.
Yeah, he goes through a whole checklist of things you need to have in place. First off, you need an existing Dynamics 365 online sandbox license that hasn't been configured yet.
Okay.
You also need an active Azure subscription, and you need the right administrative permissions, specifically the owner and service administrator roles. All your users who are going to be using the online system, they need to have accounts set up in your Office 365 tenant so they can be mapped over during the migration. And of course, those users need the right Dynamics 365 licenses as well. You also need to have access to your solution files and the code for any custom workflows or applications that you've built so those can be analyzed and validated. And finally, you need a clear plan for how you're going to map your users from your on-premises Active Directory to Office 365. That's super important for a smooth transition.
Right. So basically, everyone's going to have their accounts in the right place.
Exactly. It's all about getting your ducks in a row before you start migrating.
Okay, so now let's walk through those main stages of the migration process.
Right.
We can pull from Gupta's explanation and those articles by Vajrathna. It seems like the first step is all about getting ready, like the preparation stage. What does that involve?
Yeah, preparation is key. And like Gupta says, it all starts with taking a full backup of your on-premises Dynamics CRM database. You get that backup, and then you upload it to Azure Blob Storage. And again, the migration tool is really helpful here. It creates that specific container within your Azure storage account where that backup needs to go, so it's kind of foolproof. You also need to make sure you have the right CRM environment set up in your Azure subscription. Gupta pointed out that the number of temporary environments the tool spins up depends on what version of CRM you're migrating from. So if you're on an older version, like CRM 2011, it might have to provision temporary environments for 2011, 2013, 2015, and 2016, just as stepping stones to get to the final version.
It's like taking smaller steps to get to your destination.
Exactly.
Okay, so what happens once you've got everything prepped and ready to go?
The next big stage is validation.
Oh.
This is where you run an analysis or a validation check against your CRM solutions. This could be the default solution from your on-premises system or specific solution files that you upload.
Okay.
The tool generates a report, and it's really important that you review this carefully. Both Gupta and Vajrathna stress this. You need to identify any customizations that aren't going to be supported in the online environment and figure out how to deal with them.
So that's where you might find out if that, like, custom piece of code you wrote years ago that relies on some specific third-party component isn't going to work in Dynamics 365 online. Like Vajrathna mentions, that's one of the limitations.
Exactly. And fixing those unsupported customizations before you migrate is crucial. Once you've taken care of all that, then the process moves into the upgrade phase.
Okay.
And this is where the migration tool really shines. It automates the whole process of upgrading your database through those intermediate CRM versions within Azure. So if you started with CRM 2011, it'll automatically handle upgrading it to 2013, then 2015, and finally to 2016.
So you don't have to manually do each upgrade.
Nope, the tool takes care of it all for you. Huge time saver.
What's next? What happens when the database reaches that CRM 2016 level?
That's when you hit the actual migration stage.
Okay.
You need to give your new Dynamics 365 online organization a unique name. And then, according to Gupta, it's usually the FastTrack program manager who kicks off that final migration of your database to your Dynamics 365 online environment.
So they're kind of like the conductor, making sure everything goes smoothly.
Yeah, exactly.
So then what happens after all your data is up in the cloud?
Okay, so that brings us to the post-migration stage. There are a few key things to do here. If your CRM system is integrated with other business applications, you're going to need to either build new integrations to connect to the online environment or repoint your existing integrations so they're talking to Dynamics 365 online. You also need to do some thorough testing and validation in the online environment just to make sure everything is working as expected. Wijaratna also talks about the importance of training your users and getting them familiar with the Unified Client Interface, or UCI.
Okay.
That's the modern, updated way of accessing and using Dynamics 365.
So it's like the fresh, new look and feel. So it's not just about getting the data moved. It's about making sure the system is fully functional in its new cloud home. Now let's dig into some of the more technical stuff. Both Gupta and Wijaratna mention things to keep in mind, potential limitations. One that jumped out at me was about these supported versions of SQL Server.
Yeah, so in the Tech Talk, Gupta says the FastTrack tool supports SQL Server versions up to 2012.
Okay.
He specifically mentions that SQL Server 2014 was not supported at that time. But things can change, so it's always best to check the latest Microsoft documentation to see what the current requirements are.
Always good advice. What about database collation settings? What are those all about?
So the database collation needs to be set to Latin 1 General CIAI, specifically for English with the code 1033. Basically, it's about making sure all the data in your database is formatted in a way that the online system can understand. It's a compatibility thing.
Right. It's like making sure everyone's speaking the same language.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then there's also something about the types of database files that are supported.
Yeah, what's that all about?
So the tool only works with the standard MDF, which is your primary data file, and the LDF, which is the log file. It doesn't support databases that have multiple data files.
Okay.
And Gupta mentions that sometimes having multiple data files was recommended for on-premises environments to try and improve performance. So if your database has multiple data files, you'd probably need to consolidate them before migrating.
Okay. So basically, keep things simple.
Yeah, exactly.
Gupta also talks about the importance of cleaning up the async operation-based table. What is that, and why do you need to clean it up?
So that table, it stores information about background processes, tasks that are happening within Dynamics CRM.
Okay.
Over time, it can get really big, filled with a lot of historical data. Cleaning it up, making sure all those background jobs are completed before you take your database back up, it can help shrink the size of your backup file, which means faster upload, faster migration overall.
So it's like decluttering before you move. Get rid of all that unnecessary stuff.
Exactly. It makes the whole process smoother. He also recommends disabling full text search and removing any catalogs before creating the backup.
Okay. So it seems like keeping the database as lean as possible is a good strategy.
Definitely. Removing any unnecessary data, extra LDF files, custom indexes that you don't really need in the online environment, it can all help speed things up.
Makes sense. Now, Wijaratna's articles talk about some limitations that are specific to Dynamics 365 Online itself. One that seems pretty significant is that you can't use third-party DLLs for plugins and workflows. How does that affect customization?
Yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah.
In Dynamics 365 Online, plugins and workflows, they run in a more restricted environment, often called a sandbox.
Okay.
And they can't directly use those external third-party DLLs in the same way that they could in an on-premises deployment.
Right.
So you might need to modify your custom coin, maybe use something called IL merge to embed the necessary code within your own custom assemblies.
Okay, so a little more work on the development side. What about reports?
That's another area where things are a bit different online.
Okay.
Dynamics 365 Online mainly supports reports built with Fetch XML.
Okay.
That's a specific query language for Dynamics 365 data. If you've got reports in your on-premises system that were written using SQL queries, you're probably going to need to convert them to Fetch XML.
Right.
And that could take a bit of effort, depending on how complex those reports are.
Yeah. Wijaratna also mentions that there could be additional costs associated with data and attachment storage in the cloud.
Right. So Dynamics 365 Online comes with a certain amount of storage space included in your subscription. But if you've got a lot of data, a ton of attachments, you might end up having to pay extra.
Right. So it's something to keep in mind. And the way the system gets updated is different, right?
Yeah. Microsoft handles all the updates for Dynamics 365 Online. They call them roll-ups, and they happen a couple of times a year.
Okay.
So you don't have to plan and execute those updates yourself, which is nice,
Right.
but you do need to make sure you test everything after each update. just to make sure your customizations and any integrations you have are still working properly.
Right, so it takes some of the burden off you, but you still need to be involved in the testing process.
Exactly. And of course, in the cloud, you don't have as much control over the servers and infrastructure.
Right, because Microsoft's managing all of that.
Yeah, that's just part of using a cloud service. You're trading that deep level of control that you had on premises for the convenience and managed services of the cloud.
Right. And Wijeratne goes through some other key differences between on-prem and online, like how Microsoft handles the management, the fact that you'll be using the unified client interface, no more traditional Outlook client, things like that.
Yep, lots of things to consider. You're basically switching from managing everything yourself to letting Microsoft handle it for you. Things like how integrations work, security, authentication, it's all a bit different in the cloud.
Okay, so for bigger organizations, it's usually recommended to have separate environments for different stages of work. Wijeratne's longer article talks about setting up development, UAT, and production environments. What are the key takeaways there?
The general approach is to start with a development environment.
Okay.
You migrate a copy of your data and your customizations there, and it gives your developers a safe space to make any changes, like converting reports or updating plugins. They can test everything out, make sure it's compatible with Dynamics 365 Online. Once everything's working in development, then you move on to a UAT environment.
Okay, what's UAT?
That stands for user acceptance testing.
Okay.
That environment should be as close as possible to your production setup.
Right.
And it's where your users can do their testing, make sure all the business processes and functionalities are working as they should in the cloud. And then finally, if UAT goes well, you set up your live production environment and go live.
So it's a gradual process, moving from development to testing to live. And it sounds like whether you can get help from the FastTrack team might depend on the size of your company.
Yeah, Wijeratne mentions that FastTrack assistance is generally available for customers with 150 or more licenses from eligible Microsoft product families.
Okay.
But he also says that even if you don't meet that threshold, you might still be able to get some support from Microsoft. It's worth talking to them about your plans, maybe if you're thinking about increasing your licenses in the future.
Right, so it's always good to have that conversation. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here. What are the big takeaways for someone who's thinking about making this move?
Well, migrating to Dynamics 365 Online, it has a lot of advantages. It could save you money, simplify your maintenance and upgrades, give you that anywhere access, and it's tightly integrated with all those other Microsoft Cloud tools. Microsoft has this FastTrack program with a dedicated migration tool to make the process as smooth as possible. But you really need to do your homework. Understand the prerequisites, the different stages involved, and be aware of any potential technical limitations, like those customizations we talked about, reporting, and the fact that you're giving up some control over the infrastructure. Careful planning and preparation are key to a successful migration.
Couldn't agree more. So this deep dive, hopefully, has given you a good overview of what's involved in moving your Dynamics CRM from on-prem to the cloud.
And it makes you think, with cloud technology changing so fast, how will this whole migration process look in a few years? What new tools and strategies might we have? It's definitely something to keep an eye on.
Definitely. So if you want to dig deeper into any of these topics, we highly recommend checking out the official Microsoft documentation on Dynamics 365 migration. And definitely check out the Michael Cobbin YouTube channel for more of Josh Newkar-Gupta's technical insights.
Great channel.
And as always, if you have any questions as you're thinking about your own migration, don't hesitate to reach out. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Thanks, everyone.